Enjoy with your headphones for a better listening experience.
Please watch till the end of the video to have you most scariest part of the video.
What's a horrifying/creepy experience you have lived through?
The most horrifying thing that ever happened to me was just in October. The 26th to be exact. It was like any other day. My sister went to a doctor's appointment, and I stayed in my room reading. Bear with me, BJ Alex. Don't judge me. Anyways, my grandpa had been acting very weird recently. He got me a computer. A whole Mac to be exact, which I thought was weird because he refused to get me anything expensive. He walked into my room and asked me to take pictures of my sister's medication for her. This is the most regretful moment of my life as well. I had an attitude and rushed him out of the room so I could continue reading. Time passes and I don't see him again. My sister comes home and tells me that he isn't responding to text. So, we looked for him and the cars were still there. His phone is on the kitchen counter. This is where we freak out because we can't find him anywhere. So, she texts our mom. Mind you, we don't live with either of our parents because they are both divorced. My grandma had died of cancer a year earlier. Anyways, she tells us to look in the trailer. And we did. I went first. I climbed the steps, opened the door, and took a step in. At first my brain couldn't process what I saw. I remember everything. I remember the scene. I remember my reaction. I remember my sister's reaction. I remember talking to the police. And that's when it finally ran through my mind. I had found my grandfather's dead body. He killed himself. I'm 15 BTW. I'm okay and I'm living with my cousins currently. Still adjusting the 114. My cousin died of a heroin overdose 6 days after his 21st birthday. It was the night before he was supposed to go to rehab. My uncle woke from a dream and had an urge to go and check on him. My auntie says the minute he got out of bed she knew her son was dead. About 30 sec later my uncle called out to my auntie. They found him with the needle in his arm in his bed. The next morning on the news there was a report how there had been mass deaths from a bad batch of heroin. My cousin wasn't the only one who died. From that day to his funeral, I dreamt of him every night. After the priest came, he did some kind of blessing or something in the house, and above the door frames were these unseen crosses. So, when the light hit exactly right you could see the shape of a cross, but it must have been holy water or something because you couldn't see it front on. Worst death I ever experienced. I felt a lot of guilt that the week before when I last saw him alive I had a huge fight with him and told him he wasn't my hero anymore because he was a junkie. 115. I had a pedophile message me pretending to be a girl approximately my age. It's actually a long-winded story, but here is one of the highlights. Me being young, was talking to this girl back because I didn't know any difference. Some talk got sexual, and I even Skyped this person. Didn't have a camera, feel like a right fool after finding out. Anyway, I was in subway with a couple of friends sitting by the window. I got a message from this person saying that they can see me sitting by the window in subway. I looked around and I couldn't see said girl that had messaged me. So down the line, a few years later, I stopped talking to this account and I had the police come to my door asking to talk. They asked me if I remember talking to someone by such a name. I said yes and was freaked out. They had then told me that it wasn't actually that girl and it was a fully grown man who was a squash coach, who worked with kids. Like WTF. I talked to some woman in the police about the whole experience. In the end, the guy was caught because he left his laptop unattended in work and it got found with child porn, animal porn on there. He pleaded guilty and he's now in jail, charged with counts of attempted rape on a minor as young as 12, sexual assault charges. Fortunately, I wasn't affected by any of this like some children he was talking to. I did go to the court for his sentencing, and he got 9 years, serving at least 4.5 years, with a 5-year extended license. But when he gets out he's being deported straight away back to Sri Lanka. 116. I've never experienced sleep paralysis until a couple of years ago. I actually ended up turning it into a creepypasta, more dramatized, of course, but the concept was the same. I woke up and my body was already curled up into a fetal position, and I was unable to move. It felt like I was flexing every muscle in my body simultaneously. I knew I was physically in my bed, but I was hallucinating that I was standing at my front door. Someone was banging on it, so I opened it. I can't even remember what they looked like, all I remember was them digging their hand into my chest very slowly, and I remember feeling the pain of muscles and flesh being shredded and my ribs breaking. Then they grabbed hold of something, which I assumed was my heart, and yanked. And yanked and yanked. All the while, I can feel my own body convulsing against my bed sheets with every pull they made. I don't remember how long this lasted, but after a while, my body stops flexing and I'm able to move again. I very, very slowly start sitting up, but my entire body ached, and my chest was hurting like crazy. Finally getting into a sitting position, I touched my chest half expecting an actual hole, but there was none, just the pain. What's weird is that now, when I get the angle right, I'm able to crack my chest how you would a knuckle or back. There was another time when I was home alone and on the toilet. I heard my front door open and close, but it was too early for it to be my sister or my mom. I turned off the bathroom light and opened the door and asked who it was. My 2 cats were sitting outside the bathroom door just staring at me. Suddenly, an extremely loud and extremely sudden inhaling sound comes from the direction of the front door. My cats looked over in that direction, wide-eyed, and dropped into that time to run away stance. I slammed the door closed and didn't leave the bathroom for hours. Thank God I was still on the toilet. I have a few other stories about that particular house, but they're mostly a bunch of small incidents. The only time I've ran for my life was when I was about 10 years old. In the back of my elementary school was an extremely small, wooded area that led to a lake. Everyone in school knew it as the ditch. My best friend at the time and I went in one day to check out the overturned car that's been in there for years. I've never gone that deep into the ditch, so I was pretty excited. The car was overlooked by a small hill, and people liked to stand on that hill and throw glass bottles at the car. We threw some, but after the 3rd or 4th, we see a freaking arm reach out of the car, as if someone is trying to crawl out. My friend and I immediately got the hell out of there, slowing down when we got some distance away. Suddenly, in the short distance, we saw the tall grass. I'm not sure what kind of foliage it was, but I doubt it was tall grass, shifting open. Someone was running towards us. We only started running after it screamed, "I'm going to kill you." We ended up getting minor cuts and scrapes because we ran up a thorny shortcut to the elementary school backyard playground that the ditch connects to. As I grew old I assumed, really, that it was a homeless person sleeping in the overturned car. 117 I was hiking across Newfoundland and Labrador one summer. I came across an abandoned small town, or maybe a series of cottages is a better way to put it. It was creepy but also kind of cool. Finding a good spot to pitch a tent was always hard, and the sun was waning, so I decided to set camp on an empty site that had an old, abandoned truck behind it in a ravine. Anyway, I set everything up, the sun sets and I go to sleep. I wake up later to the sound of footsteps. Not animal steps, these were clearly human, and they were walking around my tent. As quietly as I could I brought my hand to my knife and unsheathed it. If he tried to get in I'd surprise him by just stabbing him right away. He didn't though. After a bit I heard the guy walk away. What do? I can't stay here. I wait for a bit until I'm fairly sure he's gone. I slowly and quietly unzip my tent and get out. I don't turn on my flashlight because I don't want him to know I'm up and about in case he's not too far and was planning to come back. I quickly take down the tent, roughly packing it into my bag without caring that a lot of it is just overflowing. Then I just started walking down the road. Luckily, he had walked off the way I had originally come so I could continue on my way. I just walked and walked until the sun came out. Came across a road and flagged down a truck. The guy drove me to the nearest town, and I got a hotel for a few nights. My guess is the guy was a squatter living in one of the abandoned buildings. I don't know what his intentions were. If he was simply curious or if he was gathering intel to come back later and do something. He must have seen me come into that town during the day, watching me from some darkened window or something. 118 The creepiest thing happened to me when I was 13. In my room at night, I heard some voice with overwhelming clarity announce that I would endure a rape when I was 29. For 16 years, I have thought about this. Scenarios, how to protect myself, how to avoid this thing I heard, in my room, one night. I would think of this occasionally. For 16 years. It did happen. And in no way I could have ever planned against in all my imagined scenarios or whatever. It is the most bizarre thing I have ever experienced, and it leaves me asking why and how. And why, again. I can't explain it and I will never be able to. There is no explanation as to why or how I was given a time frame for this experience when there was nothing I could have done. 119 I once woke up to noises in my bedroom that I thought was my cat biting my laptop cables. I jumped up from my bed, naked, screaming my cat's name to be face to face with a man in black clothes holding my laptops. He ran out of my room like a flash and out the front door into the night. I was so stunned that I couldn't even move. My housemates and I searched the house afterward. The thief stole 2 laptops and a half bottle of marshmallow vodka, and left behind a serrated knife. 120 I used to work in lodges and such in different national parks and monuments, and I spent a few winters in Furnace Creek in Death Valley, California. It's a fascinating and surprising place. I would suggest that anyone spends part of their winter at or near the resorts down there. It's the world's most consistently hot place, yet the mountains are so high that there's snow on them all year long. They're also some of the oldest in the world, so they've eroded down to bare minerals, and since different minerals have different weights, they are vividly striped. And because of the angle of the sun throughout the day, some of them change color. It's fascinating, but anyway, on with my story. Anyway, I got picked up by this strange man in a creepy-looking white van, with the thick metal screen, is it lattice? Behind the seats. He was pretty quiet. After we rode for a while, just unexpectedly he said, "I don't like a lot of people. I think a lot of them should die," with an eerie emptiness in his voice and his eyes. Having heard that there are a lot of strange, antisocial types of life way out in the desert, and in fact the Charles Manson family's ranch had been close to there, I decided it was best to try to identify with him, so I said I don't either. That's why I want to get away from society and live in Death Valley. By the way, I don't think he was associated with Charlie, but I used them as an example. Then, he led me if I wanted to go to an alkaline lake. I told him that I had to go to Death Valley, that even in the desert, society forces us to be places at a certain time and won't leave us alone or something like that. Then he asked me if I ever saw those dry white bones in the desert in movies and cartoons, and said that it's because of alkaline. He said that some people go there and never come back. I said that it sounded really peaceful, which gave him a smile I will never forget, and that I would try to see one someday. He said it was a long, long way off of the highway, and nobody would ever see us. But I insisted that I had to go to Death Valley. Then, he started to talk about all the things in the desert that can kill me, almost admiringly, tarantula wasps, scorpions, snakes, even some people and such. Once he said that I can get killed and I won't even see it coming. He almost made it sound inviting. And he didn't sound like he was warning me, that I should look out for these things, or that it was even a sad thing. I was terrified. I told him that I was happy to meet someone else who didn't like people, either how society does people wrong and the such, trying to sound like a fellow freak, like I was on his side, and understood him, so he would feel safe or comfortable around me, although I was the one who needed safety. Believe me, I was talking and talking, trying to get him to trust me, but not too much. It was a fine line. Nothing in my life had been this serious or important. And I admitted I was really afraid. I hate people too, almost like we're on the same side. I've been hurt in life by them too, playing the victim card and that sort of thing. He asked me about 3 times if I wanted to go to the alkaline lake, and 1 time to look at bones. I don't know what kind of bones, but I didn't want to ask. Chances are, he only wanted to be friendly and show me around, and I let my imagination run away with me, who knows. But on the other hand, I wasn't about to bet my life or well-being on it by finding out, but that instance totally freaked me out for a real long time, and though I still don't get the chills up my spine like I used to, it's still a very profound memory. 121. One of the creepiest and long-lasting experiences I've ever had was the result of a severe case of OCD, but also resulted in my diagnosis and treatment, thankfully. When I was 13 to 14, the mannerisms that I thought were normal started to get more chronic. I thought nothing of it. But one night, I saw an apparition of someone else's face directly in front of mine. I'd never seen this face before, couldn't get it out of my vision, so I stared back. They seemed to be pleading with me to help them, but were unable to make any sound at all. Eventually they faded away and I was able to get to sleep. Days passed and I assumed it was some kind of nightmare. This would happen every now and then, usually in the evenings. I had night terrors as a young child and attributed it to that. Then I started experiencing very real fear from what I learned were hallucinations caused by my OCD. If any of you have played COD Black Ops 1, you're familiar with the numbers Mason. What do they mean? I experienced seeing numbers very vividly and having an irrational fear of large numbers that had multiple 9s in a row, 4579999, 999, etc. I'd see numbers everywhere, angles, measurements, floating and nonsensical ones. Then the facial hallucinations got bad. Rather than just seeing people who I thought were ghosts or spirits needing assistance, I was 14 and didn't know how to speak about mental health at the time either, didn't want people thinking I was crazy. I began seeing terribly angry faces. Unrecognizable faces who I believed wanted something from me violently. They followed me everywhere until one day I finally spoke to my mother about it. Luckily, I have a stand-up mother and she knew what professionals to put me in touch with for my mental health. The faces were attributed to an obsession I had with wanting everyone to be supported, helped, fed, etc. A true belief in the goodness of humankind and what kindness can do for others. The numbers were attributed to the obsessions I held with statistics and efficiency. Nowadays, some 8 years later, I still struggle with aggressive auditory hallucinations for extended periods every few months, but I've learned to understand what's in my head and what's not to a point. Identifying irrational and intrusive thoughts is exhausting and exceedingly difficult at times, but I'm glad I'm not manically believing that a bunch of spirits are out to get me anymore. 122. I will always remember this so vividly as one of the scariest experiences of my life. So, for some context, my parents are and were very heavily involved in magic and summoning things. They did that very often, but they were not good at it as they had all of the technique and knowledge to do it, but they lacked a clear or positive headspace. Later in life their magic, sorry if this isn't the correct word for what they were doing. I don't know a better word, use increased and had adverse consequences, but at this time, I'm unsure specifically how often my parents, mainly my mother, did things like this. She had made me sit with her during rituals or Ouija sessions as she and my father said that I was a beacon. It made sense too, since I had spoken to my mom's dead father and told her details that even I didn't know that I knew about him. I'd been talking to spirits ever since I was a young child, and I've taken numerous pictures of spirits and just generally attracted weird things and people. So, to what happened, I remember that night that I was being particularly annoying and whatever happened my parents ended up sending me to bed early. They said that I had to turn the TV off as a punishment because usually I fell asleep watching Nickelodeon or some other cartoon channel. So, it's a summer night and I'm in bed early as I didn't have a bedtime during summer. It was dark outside, and I remember that I had the window open and the curtains open and I could see right to the street. It wasn't weird to me or anything at the time. I didn't mind it because I liked the view, although open curtains at night freak me out now LMAO. So, I was just killing time, lying in bed in the dark playing with a bunch of toys. I had a lot of toys as a kid because I had many siblings and many cousins. Basically, the house was scattered with kids' stuff. So in between playing with my toys and looking out the window since I'm bored out of my mind, when I see this black figure stand outside of the window and then I stopped, and I was like hush. I really didn't know how to feel. The thing was almost 2D looking, around 6 feet tall and completely black besides its eye holes which were like, glowing white. Now, that was bad enough, but instead of just standing outside my window, it flew into my room and started stomping towards my bed. It was so deafening. It sounded like it had big heavy boots on, and literally the only reason I knew that sound was because my dad was a correction officer at the time and his uniform had these tactical-like boots, and whenever he walked in them the sound almost boomed in my ears. So that's when I get scared, and I start screaming my lungs out and throwing toys at the door. To this day I really have no idea how no one heard the stomping, how no one seemed to hear me or if they ever heard me in the first place, or even how long I was screaming. But after what felt like an eternity, my godmom finally opened the door and was like, "What are you doing?" And the thing disappeared. I told them what happened, and my mom let me sleep in her bed. For some really weird reason, they didn't believe me. It was weird because I never lied to them about things that happened to me, and they were actively summoning bad. But yes, very scary. 123 I once witnessed a guy jump out of a 10th floor window and land on the roof of the 2nd floor. A group of us were watching from a bar patio and everyone stood in shocked horror. From the back of the group, and because of some broken thing in my brain that compartmentalizes like that in an instant, I piped up with, "Oh, that's matron pain." The open-mouthed stares I got were kind of uncomfortable. By the time I got upstairs, someone had kicked out a window and gotten to the body, trying to provide first aid and CPR, but from what I saw it was like pushing on a waterbed. 124 So back when I was 19 I was in this small town with my sister. We didn't know the town, or anyone there and just stopped to gas up, maybe get some food and find a place to sleep. We ended up driving out to one of the parks because all the motels were booked. So, we park up. No other cars in the lot or anyone around seemingly. I turn off the radio and suddenly I can hear this blood-curtailing scream. This woman comes running up to the car drenched in blood asking for help. I get out and see right behind her some guy who I assume is her abuser because he looks like he's on bath salts. Seeing this I get the girl in the car drive out of there, not before the guy gets his hand through the window and yes I mean through it. Guy tried to grab the wheel but failed. Dropped the girl off at the police station. The guy was supposedly her dad who is just ducked, then got the duck out of there. 125 I worked late one night years ago as the on-duty manager of a small store. We close at 10 and our policies make it where there are always 2 people on for close. I have been mopping floors since it was winter, so they get really gross. This man approached me and started chatting me up and with my best customer service smile I replied. It all seemed innocent enough, like a chat you might have with any stranger. Then he started asking about more personal things and how he has been trying to make friends since moving back. I still kept up my customer service act up because he seemed nice enough. After he left I didn't think anything about it till we closed. After closing it takes us about 45 minutes to count drawers and get out of there. I was doing this as my coworker did some cleaning. When she was done she sat in the office since we had to leave together. Her ride sits outside in a car waiting for her and starts sending her texts about a guy outside. We look and sure enough it is Mr. Friendly from earlier. I kinda half panic unsure what to do when coworker gets another text that he approached the car asking if they have a knife. What? Who does that? So, I called the police and we waited for them in the store. The ride outside had already locked their doors after they approached them. Police arrived and asked him to leave. Apparently what he told the police officers was that I had told him I was going to hang out with him after work, which I would never do. See, I lived 45 minutes away. It was already pushing 11 at night, so I wouldn't be home till 12 already. I would not agree to hang out that late at night. Police escorted me to my car as well, which made me feel better. The worst part is that I had thousands of dollars on me since I had to do the night drop-off at the bank. If he had some sinister plan in mind that could have financed it, and any getaway he might need. Thinking of what could have happened still gives me the chills. Never did see him again, so I guess that is good. 126 When I was a teenager, my best friend at the time invited me over to his new girlfriend's house to play video games. She lived on a very rural, mountain road. While we were hanging out, she asked if we wanted to go smoke at the old mill near her house. Sounded good enough. So, the 3 of us set out on foot to this mill. It was about a mile away total. We had to hop through an old, chained barrier to access the drive to the mill. Then it's about another half of a mile down. This path was creepy enough. Literally snaking through the forest, very overgrown. Very silent. The entire walk I was bombarding my friend's girl with questions about the mill. She said she didn't know much, only that it was incredibly old and had been abandoned for a long time, and that she had heard somewhere that it used to be an old Civil War hospital or something. After walking and walking, we round a bend, and it comes into view. A 3-story brick building. It was huge, like a manufacturing building in the middle of nowhere. It had a huge wooden water wheel attached and a stream was running along the side of the property. Broken windows, trees growing inside, you get the picture. Before going inside, we walked down to the stream where an old cement bridge with metal railing crossed. We sat on the bridge for about half an hour, smoking and talking. Finally, we worked up the nerve to go in. Well, I did anyway. My friends never seemed affected by the overall eerie essence of the place since we had gotten there. Inside was utter chaos. Old equipment, trash, beer cans from old parties. I remember there were these really neat spiral staircases that led to each floor, made of heavy black metal. They seemed out of place because they were ornate and fancy. Out of place for an old mill anyway. We explored each floor, until finally descending into the basement. The basement had these tiny windows letting in light from the side of the building with the stream. We were trying to look out when I suddenly had this overwhelming feeling of dread come over me. In the corner, in the shadows of that basement, was a man lying against the wall, who appeared to be touching himself as he watched us. He was halfway covered by the shadows, so it was hard to make out. But what I could see was he was very ragged and dirty, like he was homeless. I hit my friend on the arm so he would look. My friend yelled at him, something like, "What the fuck, dude?" But the man never said a word. Just grunting and breathing heavily. We bolted. I don't even know how to explain how fast we ran. Up those spiral staircases and back up the path until we were back at the chained barrier. We ran without stopping or saying a word until my ribs were aching. Shit was so freaky, I still remember it so well.
127 more creepy/odd than horrifying, though when it happened I was very spooked. 2 friends and I were driving overnight from Chicago to Denver. We were doing rotating shifts, one driving, one awake in passenger's seat, to keep the driver up, and one sleeping in the back. So, I'm driving during the graveyard shift. I don't know how many of you have driven through the dead of night on I-80 in Nebraska. But west of Lincoln, it is desolate. So, we're doing the really rural part of the journey. Rain had been coming and going and we were driving pretty cautiously as there's no lights out there or anything. We were pretty west of Lincoln by this point and couldn't see really any sort of sign that we were passing small towns or what. We probably were, but pitch black of night. It's around 2 or 3 in the morning. We hadn't seen a rest stop or even a turn off for over 30 minutes or so. Keep in mind we are in a vehicle. Literally nothing. Suddenly to the left of the car on the median, the headlights pass over 2 hunched figures in flannel and straw hats, walking the same direction we were going. I'm quiet for a second. Then ask my awake friend if she also saw them. Yup. She says, tentatively. We hadn't seen any broken down vehicles or houses with lights on nearby. We also took probably a good 20 seconds to acknowledge that we indeed have seen people on the median at 2:30 in the morning, literally in the middle of nowhere. Also, no, we didn't have cell service, so there was no one to call really. And for what? To this day we call this the Children of the Corn in Nebraska.
I remember being 17, in a group care home and going out drinking. Anyways, some man kept trying to buy me drinks and I refused, and I said about going home. I turned around for no reason, just felt watched. And he's there. Running at me. I ran into the middle of the road hoping for a car or something. It didn't happen. I ran back to the group home that was only 5 minutes away and he was full on chasing me down. Get to the group home, I was shoved in a taxi by some man that grabbed me. He got in beside me and someone was on the other side so I couldn't exit. They took me to the other end of my town and as soon as they let me out I ran. I remember waiting around corners because I could hear them shouting for me and looking for me. When I knew it was safe, I ran like hell back to the group home. Took me an hour. When I got back, I told the night staff and they had it on camera but couldn't read the license plate. 129. When I was in high school, I had just returned home from hanging out with my boyfriend. It was about midnight, and due to a smaller driveway, I always parked at the top of the street. My parents' house is down a small hill. I'm naturally pretty cautious and would always wait to exit my car until I saw that no cars were approaching. This night I saw it was clear and quickly began to exit my car when a yellow Hammer began speeding down the road, catching me off guard. I tried to calm myself, thinking they'd just pass by me. It would all be fine, just gotten out, grab my bed, and make it inside the house. The yellow Hummer did pass me, by a couple of car lengths. Then it reversed so fast its wheels screeched on the pavement, right to where I was. At this point my fight or flight kicked in and I took off. As I was stumbling down the hill, I heard the yellow Hummer's door open. Behind me someone was yelling, but I felt like I was in the process of blacking out, or maybe my non-essential senses were dulling and zeroing in on just getting myself to my front door. I made it and was able to unlock the door and throw myself in. I don't know if they followed me down into the yard. I don't know if their intention was to take me, or somebody was just trying to scare me. If they were trying to take me, I can't believe the timing worked out so that I was able to get to safety. Regardless, I'll never forget it. 130. A family in my street vanished. I didn't know them too well because they liked to keep to themselves, but when they disappeared, it was all too weird because there was no moving truck. I never even saw them get anything in boxes, etc. Their 2 dogs also remained in the house, which was even weirder because I knew they loved their pets and wouldn't abandon them out of nowhere. One night, one of these dogs escaped and I decided to go and try to put her back inside the garden area. I rang the bell just to be sure there wasn't anyone there. And boom, a whole new family. When they first came to the gate, they remained inside. Their gate has no bars, it's more like a normal door, and I couldn't see their faces. I described the dog, I knew the dog lived there, and they said there was no dog like that in that house. I kept walking the dog around, maybe I got confused and the dog didn't actually live there. A few minutes later a woman quickly opens the door, calls me and the dog, pulls the dog back inside and closes the door. Dog escapes again. I will go to retrieve the dog again. This time, I decided to ask what happened to the previous family, as again, I didn't see them move out. Woman says something around the lines of, "Oh, we don't really know, they're traveling, I think, they gave us the house for us to take care of while they're gone," and then says she has no idea if they will ever even come back. At this point, I'm absolutely creeped out because their explanations make no sense. I had never seen them before and didn't understand why the family that lived the house before didn't get someone from their own family who usually came to visit to watch over the property. One day, I was sitting on my balcony which directly faces their house. I swear to damn God the entire family just gathered in front of the window and started waving with a weird-ass smile in their faces. There were a bunch of weird things happening in their house and they always refused help, not ever allowing anyone to see inside. At this point, I'm 100% sure they killed my previous neighbors and are just living in their home. Trust me, my country is strange, and it wouldn't be surprising if something like that actually happened. Anyways, I was absolutely terrified they would go on a murderous spree around the street. They lived here for about 6 months until the previous family returned from a family trip to Portugal. I hate them for scaring the entire neighborhood. I still feel very suspicious of that weird-ass family, and if they ever appear on the news for killing someone, I won't be surprised. TLDR, a weird family moved into my neighborhood, acted all weird for months, not allowing anyone to see their house, probably were hiding a corpse and then just vanished again as the old family came back from a trip to Portugal.
Thanks for watching. Please comment, like, share and subscribe. The Internet Surfer on YouTube for more horror and scary stories.